It is the morning of May 19th, 2026, and British intelligence has just traced a coordinated smear campaign against the Princess of Wales directly to Queen Camilla's private estate. A digital footprint has just exposed an unprecedented internal crisis at Buckingham Palace. At exactly 14 minutes past 6 this morning, London time, a highly targeted article surfaced on a secondary media outlet. The headline explicitly claimed, citing unnamed insider sources, that the Princess of Wales was experiencing a severe nervous breakdown following the pressure of the recent state banquet. The objective was to instantly rewrite the global narrative of that night. By framing Catherine as emotionally unstable, the leak aimed to slowly invalidate her public standing, mirroring the exact media playbook utilized decades ago to isolate Princess Diana. However, the execution failed to account for modern royal cybersecurity protocols. Within exactly 17 minutes of the article going live, the Internal Security Division had completely bypassed the publication's proxy servers to trace the data packet. According to insiders close to the investigation, the security chief immediately placed a secure call to the highest level of palace administration. The reported dialogue was brief and factual. The chief stated, "We have the origin point. The source is not external. The IP address did not trace back to a tabloid newsroom. It pointed directly to a private, highly restricted router located at Raymill House, the personal countryside residence of Queen Camilla. Communications on these specific servers are strictly limited to a very small, vetted inner circle. Generating a digital trail of this magnitude indicates a rushed operation rather than a carefully planned strategy. This leak was a reactive strike. Following the visible marginalization she experienced during the recent diplomatic gala, Queen Camilla deployed this anonymous story as an immediate distraction to shift public scrutiny onto Catherine. It was a direct response to her diminishing position within the royal hierarchy. But the plan backfired. Instead of damaging the Princess of Wales, the move left undeniable digital evidence that Buckingham Palace can no longer dismiss as mere palace gossip. The quiet internal friction has now escalated into a documented security incident. So, is this anonymous media leak the final move of a royal who has run out of options, or is it merely the opening shot of a much larger campaign to reclaim her lost ground? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Because the financial paper trail we are about to uncover next will completely change everything you thought you knew about this institution. If you believed the digital footprint tracing back to Raymill House was the most damaging revelation of the morning, you are entirely underestimating the kind of leverage currently sitting inside Kensington Palace. A cyber breach can sometimes be dismissed by clever public relations as a staff error or a rogue employee. A meticulously documented financial paper trail, however, cannot be explained away. At exactly 45 minutes past 8 this morning, Prince William's motorcade bypassed standard protocol and pulled directly into the private gates of Clarence House. The Prince of Wales did not request a routine audience. He required an immediate meeting. What followed was a highly restricted, closed-door session with King Charles that lasted precisely 32 minutes. The room was entirely cleared of all senior aides and private secretaries. According to highly placed sources within the royal household, Prince William did not go there to debate media leaks, and he did not go there to discuss family friction. He went there to deliver a definitive ultimatum. He reportedly placed a single document on the king's heavy oak desk, a detailed financial bank statement highlighting a sequence of quiet wire transfers totaling exactly $2,140,000. This was not standard royal expenditure. The funds were quietly moved earlier this year, channeled through a complex series of private trusts directly linked to Queen Camilla's inner circle. The purpose of this massive sum, it was the precise capital required to commission the flawless, high-grade zirconia replica of the historic royal tiara. To fully understand this specific number, you have to realize that replicating a piece of sovereign jewelry is an immense undertaking. to craft a counterfeit capable of passing completely undetected under the intense, multi-directional lighting of a Buckingham Palace state banquet requires master jewelers, absolute secrecy, and priority access to rare materials. You are purchasing absolute silence just as much as you are purchasing elite craftsmanship. $2,140,000 is the exact market price of that silence. But the origin of this money is what elevates this situation from a private household dispute to a potential national crisis. If these funds were strictly siphoned from private wealth, it remains a devastating personal betrayal. However, if investigators find that even a fraction of this amount intersected with the sovereign grant, the taxpayer money allocated to fund the working monarchy, this ceases to be a family issue entirely. It immediately becomes a matter of public financial misconduct. This morning, the Prince of Wales demonstrated a fundamental shift in how he operates within the monarchy. He is no longer the patient heir waiting for the institution to slowly manage its internal problems. The man who walked into Clarence House today was a future king protecting his wife with calculated, undeniable precision. He presented his father with an impossible, unavoidable choice. King Charles was effectively cornered by hard financial evidence. William's terms were reportedly absolute. Either the palace immediately handles this internally, permanently stripping the Queen Consort of her operational influence, or these financial documents would bypass palace communications entirely and be handed directly to the House of Lords for a formal parliamentary inquiry. King Charles was left staring at a piece of paper that held the power to unravel public trust in his reign. He had to make a real-time decision between shielding his wife from the consequences of her own ambition or protecting the crown itself from a catastrophic public investigation. The choice he made in those 32 minutes would dictate the unprecedented events of the afternoon, setting off a chain reaction that the British monarchy has never witnessed in modern history. While the highest offices of Buckingham Palace were actively managing an unprecedented internal crisis, the specific target of this entire operation was standing directly in front of the global press, smiling brighter than ever. Sometimes, the most effective response to a coordinated attack is simply showing up and looking completely unbothered. At precisely 10 o'clock this morning, just as the financial ultimatums were being laid out behind closed doors at Clarence House, the Princess of Wales arrived for a scheduled solo engagement at the Royal Children's Hospital. The timing of this appearance was remarkable. By this hour, the anonymous leak attempting to frame her as emotionally fragile and on the verge of a breakdown had already been circulating online for nearly 4 hours. The International Press Corps was stationed at the hospital entrance in massive numbers, waiting. They were looking for any microscopic crack in her demeanor, a forced smile, a hesitant step, a fleeting look of exhaustion to validate the morning's headlines. They got absolutely none of that. Instead, Catherine stepped out of her vehicle, projecting undeniable certainty. In royal circles, a wardrobe is never merely about aesthetics. It is a highly calibrated method of public communication. Today, she did not choose soft pastels or neutral tones to blend in or appear approachable. She chose a sharp, impeccably tailored, vibrant crimson-red suit. In the silent, visual language of royal diplomacy, red is never a color of retreat. It is the color of absolute confidence, of high visibility, and, quite subtly, of a warning. It was a clear photographic declaration that she is not afraid, she is not hiding, and she remains entirely in control of her own narrative. The British monarchy has long operated on a famous, unspoken motto: never complain, never explain. Throughout history, many royals have struggled immensely with this rule, finding the enforced silence suffocating during times of public scrutiny. Catherine, however, has taken this outdated protocol and refined it into a formidable defense mechanism. She spent her morning greeting hospital executives, engaging warmly with families, and posing for photographs with an effortless, radiant calm. She did not need her press team to issue a frantic statement defending her mental health. She did not need to leak a counter-story to friendly journalists. She simply allowed her flawless physical presence to completely dismantle the anonymous rumors published just hours prior. Her composure was an impenetrable shield. The contrast between the two women at the center of this mounting crisis could not have been more striking. On one side, there is Queen Camilla, operating in the shadows, reacting out of panic, and leaving a trail of digital and financial evidence in a frantic attempt to maintain her footing within the hierarchy. On the other side is the Princess of Wales, operating entirely in the light. Catherine did not need to raise her voice or engineer a complex, expensive media distraction. She demonstrated that while panic is always loud and messy, true institutional power is perfectly silent. Her appearance at the hospital was not just a successful public engagement, it was a masterclass in psychological resilience. She proved to the establishment and to the cameras waiting outside that she is practically unshakable. But while Catherine was smiling for the public, the severe consequences of William's closed-door meeting at Clarence House were just beginning to materialize. The king had been forced to make a definitive choice, and the official paperwork to execute that choice was already moving through the palace channels. At exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, the communications office at Buckingham Palace issued a standard digital bulletin. On the surface, it appeared to be nothing more than routine administrative paperwork. But to anyone who understands the intricate, coded language of the royal institution, the single document was a career-ending blow. The official email was categorized under Internal Memo 88A. Its headline read simply, "A restructuring of royal duties." The British monarchy never publicly fires its senior members. It restructures them. The wording was impeccably polite, meticulously crafted, and utterly devastating. The statement announced that Queen Camilla would be stepping back from 14 of her most prominent charitable patronages, effective immediately. Furthermore, her highly anticipated upcoming international tour schedule was quietly listed as indefinitely postponed. To the general public, stepping down from charities might sound like a minor scheduling adjustment or a gradual transition into a quieter royal life. But inside the royal ecosystem, patronages are much more than ceremonial ribbon-cutting events. They are the very oxygen that sustains a working royal's relevance. These organizations provide direct, unfiltered access to political leaders, influential global donors, and the international press. They are the absolute foundation of a royal's social and political capital. By permanently severing her connection to these 14 key organizations, the palace was effectively shutting off her operational oxygen supply. Without these active, highly visible duties, a queen consort is rendered entirely ceremonial. She is permitted to wear the historic jewelry, stand on the balcony, and live within the palace walls, but she is completely stripped of her influence. She is no longer an active decision-maker within the institution. She is simply an observer. The position she spent decades fighting to secure has been instantly transformed into a gilded cage. She retains the highest title in the land, but the actual authority attached to that title has been systematically dismantled. This unprecedented mandate did not come from a faceless committee or a team of public relations managers. It required the direct physical signature of King Charles. For years, he had defied public opinion and intense institutional resistance to elevate Camilla, bringing her into the very center of the monarchy. She was his closest confidant, his most trusted partner through decades of intense media scrutiny and private battles. But the irrefutable financial documents presented by Prince William that morning at Clarence House left the king with absolutely no alternative. The monarchy was facing a catastrophic public scandal involving unauthorized financial transfers and a coordinated internal scheme. When forced to choose between the long-term survival of the crown and the protection of his wife, the king made the only choice a reigning monarch can realistically make. He had to prioritize the integrity of the throne over his personal loyalty. Signing that document was a calculated, agonizing decision to neutralize the threat from within before it could reach the public and damage the monarchy from the outside. The paperwork was signed, the press release was dispatched to the media, and the consequences were irreversibly set in motion. Yet, the king's decisive action did not stop with his wife. The palace was not merely reorganizing its senior members, it was actively securing its borders. And the next individual on their list was about to lose everything. King Charles did not stop with simply restructuring his wife's duties. When the absolute authority of the monarch is threatened from the inside, neutralizing the primary target is never enough. The entire supporting network that enabled the crisis must be systematically dismantled. At exactly 7 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, the palace security apparatus executed the next critical phase of their containment strategy. The focus now shifted outside the immediate royal family, aiming directly at the Queen Consort's closest personal allies. Armed diplomatic protection officers operating under strict, highly confidential orders arrived at a private address. Their objective was singular and immediate: to formally confiscate the highest-level royal security clearance pass belonging to Laura Lopes, Queen Camilla's daughter. Along with the physical retrieval of this badge came a verbal directive that leaves absolutely no room for appeal. She was officially and indefinitely barred from entering any property under the jurisdiction of the Crown Estate. To the general public, losing a palace security pass might seem like a minor administrative inconvenience. But within the rigid hierarchy of the British establishment, a permanent banishment from the Crown Estate is a profound demotion. The Crown Estate is not merely a collection of historic palaces, royal parks, and private residences. It is the operational, financial, and diplomatic engine of the monarchy. It encompasses the private offices where elite societal networks converge, where global influence is brokered, and where the most powerful figures in the country interact. An expulsion from these grounds means an instant, total severing of all associated privileges. It immediately revokes access to royal security details, cuts off highly advantageous diplomatic channels, and permanently closes doors to the exclusive financial and social circles that operate entirely within the palace orbit. In the span of a single, quiet afternoon, Laura Lopes was downgraded from a heavily protected royal insider with unrestricted access to a private citizen carrying the heavy, invisible burden of a palace exile. In the upper tiers of London society, this kind of institutional freeze-out is highly contagious. A person deemed a security risk by Buckingham Palace quickly finds that other high society doors suddenly lock as well. This swift and unyielding action illustrates a fundamental, uncompromising reality about the British monarchy. It often presents itself to the world as a unified family, but fundamentally, it operates and survives strictly as a corporate institution. When those two identities come into conflict, the institution will always prioritize its own preservation. There is a very distinct, invisible boundary drawn around the throne. Once an individual steps over that boundary and actively endangers the stability of the crown, personal relationships are entirely irrelevant. Decades of family ties, close proximity, and shared history are instantly overridden by the strict necessity of institutional survival. For the king, authorizing this level of complete exclusion against a member of his extended family underscores the severity of the morning's discoveries. He was not merely punishing a misstep, he was securing the perimeter. He sent an unambiguous message to the entire royal household, the staff, and the extended family. The protective shield of the monarchy only extends to those who uphold its integrity. The moment someone leverages their position to actively sabotage the future of the crown, that protective shield is not simply removed. It is transformed into an impenetrable wall, leaving them completely on the outside. It took Queen Camilla nearly 2 decades of careful public relations, strategic patience, and quiet maneuvering to finally secure her place at the absolute pinnacle of the British monarchy. It took exactly 24 hours for the institution to systematically strip away that influence and push her back to the very margins she fought so hard to escape. But as the palace doors close on one of the most intense, high-stakes days in recent royal history, a much larger question remains looming over Buckingham Palace. Is the system actually safe now? King Charles's actions this afternoon were undeniably severe, but they were also a masterclass in institutional preservation. By signing that single administrative document and executing those rapid security mandates, the king effectively achieved two critical objectives at once. First, he immediately shut down a coordinated internal disruption that was dangerously close to becoming a global public scandal. Second, and perhaps far more vital for the long-term survival of the crown, he firmly cemented the absolute authority of the next generation. By acting decisively on the financial evidence presented by Prince William, and by creating an unyielding protective barrier around the Princess of Wales, the king sent a permanent message to both the royal household and the public. He demonstrated that the future king and queen are not simply waiting in the wings, they are already operating with ironclad authority. They are protected, they are unified, and anyone who attempts to undermine them will face immediate institutional exile. So, what exactly does the future look like for a queen consort who has just been severed from her primary sources of influence? The reality is a very unique kind of royal isolation. Camilla will not vanish from the public eye. She will still be seen in the official photographs. She will likely attend the mandatory state functions, and she will stand on the Buckingham Palace balcony. But her day-to-day existence within those walls will be fundamentally altered. She is now navigating an invisible, heavily monitored perimeter. Without her patronages, she loses her daily briefings, her dedicated staff for charitable initiatives, and her direct access to political and societal figures. She retains the heavy crown, but she has been quietly relieved of the power that makes wearing it worthwhile. However, an ecosystem as vast and complex as the royal household never entirely clears out its vulnerabilities in a single afternoon. The individuals who facilitated the secure bank transfers, the aides who turned a blind eye to the digital leaks, and the quiet allies who supported this failed maneuver have simply retreated into the background. They have not vanished. The monarchy must now operate in a state of permanent vigilance, highly aware that the quiet factions within their own walls are simply waiting for the environment to change again. If this unprecedented 24-hour crisis has proven anything to the world, it is a timeless reality about how power truly functions. Enduring authority never belongs to those who desperately reach for it, scheme in the shadows for it, or panic when they feel it slipping from their grasp. It ultimately belongs to those who possess the remarkable discipline to remain perfectly calm while the chaos detonates around them. Throughout this entire ordeal, the Princess of Wales did not have to launch a public counterattack. She did not leak financial documents or authorize a single anonymous press statement. She merely stepped out into the daylight, maintained her flawless composure, and allowed her opponents to completely dismantle their own standing through their own reckless urgency. Without breaking a single protocol or speaking a single defensive word, Catherine delivered a definitive, quiet checkmate.